Good afternoon. On behalf of Vedanta Society Berkeley, I welcome you all this evening to this Living in Spirit lecture series. Vedanta Society Berkeley started this continued lecture series in 2016 with an objective that eminent academicians and experts from diverse fields explore ways in which their disciplines can help individuals realize their boundless human potential and the approaches to manifest it. This is the first time we are holding a Living in Spirit lecture online using Zoom platform because of this unprecedented and challenging period we are experiencing all over the globe. It is my pleasure to welcome Reverend Heng this afternoon to deliver his lecture on Buddhist perspective in this scenario of new normal. Dharma Master Reverend Heng is a senior disciple of Hussein Hua and is currently the director of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. He was ordained as a Buddhist monk in 1976. He is an alumnus of UC Berkeley. He is an excellent orator and actively involved in interfaith dialogue. Right now, he's in Australia, back down because of this lockdown. We are grateful to his kind acceptance of our invitation to speak, despite the distance and the enormous time difference. It is needless to say that we would have been extremely glad if Reverend Heng could deliver this lecture physically in our sanctuary at Berkeley. But I am sure you will not be deprived in any way by his online lecture. If you would like to ask any question after the lecture, please raise your hand and Reverend Jin Chuan of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery will arrange for you to ask your question. Without much ado, let us all join our hands to welcome Reverend Heng Shu.
Amitofo. Venerable Swami Prasanatmananda, my Dharma friend. Dharma friends, new and old, welcome to today's lecture. It's an honor indeed to be invited by the Vedanta Society of Berkeley to continue the wholesome, friendly, ever deepening relationship between the Buddhists of the Bay Area and the Vedanta Society worldwide. This relationship is, let me establish the bona fides, the authenticity of this relationship. We began years ago with Swami Prabhupada, who was the director of the Vedanta Society of San Francisco, one of the oldest ones in North America. And also Swami Vedananda, who is connected both at San Francisco and also at Olima, invited Master Hsuan Hua to come to Olima in 1992 to give a talk. And I'll never forget, that was my first meeting with Swami Prabhupada in Olima. And also Professor Houston Smith was present. And how did the day begin? Swami Prabhupada, who could look very stern, he came to the microphone, and there's the big tent, and maybe 1,000+ people there. And Swamiji looks out at everyone, and he's got this look on his eye like this. He says, "Welcome. And now relax, he says. And everyone, oh, you know, it melted us. It was just wonderful. And then the way that the Ulima lectures are set up was always a dialogue. And there would be a Swami, a Venerable Swami from somewhere. I think this case, he was from Chicago, I believe, and Master Hua. And I had the blessing to be the translator that day. And the topic was wisdom. And Master Hua started out by saying, well, thank you for inviting me. He said, unfortunately, I don't know anything about wisdom, but I can sure talk about stupidity, he said. And he took everyone by surprise because he was so humorous and so he clearly he was enjoying himself. And so the relationship continued. And we visited Ulima with our youth group to have youth dialogues for days. And that was the first introduction of many of the Buddhists to the Ramakrishna order. And then a few years later, I was invited to be the memorial speaker. And we continued our relationship through interfaith in the Bay Area. And I recall meeting with Swami Vedanta many, many times. And then recently we met with Swami Prasanatmananda in Berkeley and started our friendship. So I'm delighted to be invited today to talk about the new normal, right? And indeed, it is the case. I wanted to share with everyone that I am in Australia. So I wanted to, now don't anybody save your screen at this point, but I am here, and outside I have kookaburras and currawongs and lorikeets and turkeys. So this is, I'm not to say enjoying, but you could say I'm certainly thriving here during the quarantining phase here in southeastern Queensland, here in the bush. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share my screen this way and bring up, but this is just down below the view here is the Billabong, the pool just down below my cabin here. I'm going to share with you what I prepared with some visual aids, right? Can everybody see the globe? Is that good? Yeah, okay. So today's talk, Skillful Living in the New Normal, Lessons from the Monastic Community. A talk virtually at the Berkeley Vedanta Temple, in the future in person, we hope. So now the idea is, as Swamiji mentioned, my teacher, whose name I just gave you, is the source of my knowledge of the Dharma. And as we begin, while this is not specifically a Dharma talk, this is more a social conversation. I'd like to put my palms together and start in a traditional way, if it's all right with everyone. And it goes like this. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchedoye olahudi samyao sanputoshe. Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. All right, thank you for letting me do that. Here's my point today. Living in Spirit is the name of our series here at the Berkeley Vedanta Temple. And we're challenged. We're faced with not only a pandemic, that is, the pandemic in America is in mid-stride. It hasn't diminished at all. Beyond that, there's an economic crisis. People have lost their jobs. People need assistance with food. Furthermore, I'm going to place these problems in a bigger problem, which is the climate. The fact that once the pandemic has calmed, we will have been through another fire season in California. And Australia, as people know, last early, it's the opposite season. So it was December here, which was summer, went through a horrible fire season. So there are multiple issues facing not only humanity, but also the natural world around us. And somehow, Vedanta monks from the Ramakrishna order, Buddhist monks, Catholic monasteries worldwide have somehow been able to live sustainably. And my point today is that Buddhist and Vedanta monastics have much to offer the world in this time of crisis. And ways in particularly to live gracefully, wisely, sustainably. Why is that an interesting topic? Where's the tension to make this of interest? It's that most people, I think, by and large, think monastics are kind of old-fashioned, right? Anachronistic, right? Irrelevant, just kind of living under trees, seeking nirvana or bliss with the unconditioned. The monastery is not the first place people look for answers to survival, but I would put before all of you the reality that monasteries have been surviving for millennia and thriving. You could say that the Buddhist community is the Buddhist monastic community is the world's longest running fraternity and sorority. Why is that? Why is that the case? Today, I want to share some qualities of monasteries, East and West, and monastic life that can help humanity and the natural world thrive skillfully in the new normal. So that's what we're about. If that sounds interesting to you, hang on. Now, that's one text. I'm going to stop my sharing and come back to another text here that I'm going to use as my basis for our conversation. And here we go. You know, it's true that often after hours at my computer, my eyeballs feel dry and irritated. Apparently the itching and the burning has something to do with hours of staring at the monitor, or this device, you know, staring at this thing just for hours and hours. And the surface of the eyeball, because we stop blinking, the surface of the eyeball gets dehydrated, right? So how do we solve the problem? We have to step away from the machine. We have to turn it off. We have to cool off the flaming, flickering, pixelated images that burn patterns of light into our sensitive eyeballs. And how strange that I'm on the computer telling you this story, right? So the Buddha, let me start that sentence again here. I can find relief from my burning eyeballs by shutting down the computer. In the Buddha's third teaching called the Fire Sutta, he says, not only the eyes, but all the senses are on fire, he said. O monks, he said, the entire world is burning. All things are burning, he said. However, the Buddha goes on to say, it is not the world that's on fire, but it's the senses. He says the eyes are on fire. The objects of sight are on fire. The eye consciousness is on fire, and so on through the 18 senses, he says. So, what about this? When we see through burning senses, the world itself looks to be on fire. The Buddha then goes on to say, O monks, he says, and I would include that today to all of you good lay people. He says, the solution to the burning of the senses are the moral precepts. Why follow the precepts? And he says, because to do so puts out the fires of the senses. So moral precepts, it means be wholesome people. Why be wholesome people? Because wholesome people make a better world. How simple this sounds, how simplistic this sounds, maybe trite, right? But it has been the watchword for Buddhist monastic communities' method to living responsibly in the world for centuries. Now, there's a sutra that I follow extensively called the Flower Adornment, the Avatamsaka, called the Maha Vaipulya Buddha Avatamsaka Sutra. And in that sutra, the Buddha says, the perfection of morality, living as a human the best possible way, lies in the ability of the precepts to eradicate the fire of afflictions. So, okay, what have we got in that image? Fire and afflictions, precepts extinguish. So what's the connection? That's worth our thought, right? What is the connection between living well and having the fire of afflictions, greed, anger, delusion, pride, doubt, jealousy, extinguished and cool and calm and not burning? Well, extinguishing the fire of afflictions is the highest expression of morality. So from a Buddhist's point of view, one Buddhist's point of view, I can't speak for all of Buddhism, but I can just speak as someone who's been working at this for 4 decades now, that the precepts of the monastic rule are the antidote to the burning of the senses. So if we extend that, then potentially the precepts are the antidote to the fires of the world. So we can infer that the warming of the climate worldwide would also yield to the putting out of the fire of afflictions. And the answer, the method to that, would be to look at how to be better people. So what is the impact on climate change of the precept codes? Let's be specific here. What are we talking about? Well, we start with the 5 lay precepts. That's the first. I have a gang fight out here on my deck with the lorikeets. So if I'm drowned out, it's because we've got some pugnacious birds feeding out here. So the Pratimoksha expands on the 5 lay precepts. Let's see now. Actually, I can prove to you something. We've learned how to use Zoom in a creative way. These are the birds I was talking about. There they are. They're right outside my door. So, never mind. Okay. So what are the precepts we're talking about? We're talking about killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. So holding these precepts, that is to say, we find these very same precepts embedded in the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali. We find them in the Holy Quran. We find them in the 10 Commandments, 4 out of the 5, right? So these are not foreign to any religious founder of religion. They're fundamental to the basic description of how to be a better person. So if we hold these precepts and live with them as guidelines to our behavior, we are affecting the environment directly, because the precepts function as an interface with the world. These are guidelines to facilitate our resolve to live the life of spirit, living in spirit, and still make skillful decisions about the situations that you or I meet in both our inner and outer worlds, right? The rules allow us to engage the world without leaving the path, leaving our spiritual practice. So I'm going to propose today that the new normal is an opportunity for us. What is the new normal? Face masks, quarantine. By the way, I did not put on my mask before I began the talk today. I could have done that. I guess I could have masked myself. Isn't that where I am here in Queensland? We don't have we don't have a mask rule in Cleveland, but I know there is one now in California. So since we're online, I guess I can safely do without a mask. But how do we do that? How do we live skillfully? I'm going to suggest that in this time of new normal, a situation we've never faced in our lifetimes by learning how monastics have been living skillfully with the precepts, then when whatever comes out of this experience that we're going through right now, there will be benefit by having to cut back what? We're going to have to cut back greed, we're going to have to cut back harming, and we're going to have to cut back on the sense of me as an isolated individual, broken from the world around me and not connected to the environment. So let's take a look. What are the themes that we can develop from the Buddhist, from the monastic community, both Vedanta and Buddhist, and Catholic as well? The Buddha said, monks, the entire world is burning. All things are burning. The senses are on fire. However, the Shila Paramita, the perfection of morality, is able to eradicate the fires of all afflictions, says the Avatamsaka Sutra. How interesting. Precepts are this interface between, we can substitute for monastic, we can use for a practitioners, right, a spiritual being, resolve to live the holy life, and the situations that she or he encounters in both the inner and outer world. What are those monastic rules? They specify the interface for skillful living on the planet. We practice harmless, compassionate engagement using virtuous behavior and wisdom's skillful means, right? Sounds good? Well, what an opportunity this gives us to live into the new normal, borrowing the wisdom of compassion. What are the views that I wanted to share? No greed, simplicity instead. No harm, ahimsa instead. No selfish solipsism, loneliness, interdependence instead. And then spiritual values, priority. And then the last one is valuable because it's non-anthropocentricity. Say that 3 times in a row, right? What does it mean? It means living by removing humanity from the center of the world and living instead as the, I'm going to shift out of my, let's see here. There we go. Living instead like Indra's net, right? You're all familiar with that image. They say that Chakradevanam Indra, in the heaven of the Tristrimsha heaven, where the Buddha proposed that chakra lives, he has an adornment in front of his palace, which is a net. It's a beautiful net of pearls, and each pearl is at the interstice of a net, right? At the knot, there's a pearl right there. And each pearl, when you look into one pearl, you see the reflection of all the different pearls perfectly, without excluding any. And yet, the entirety of the net can be returned to a single pearl. So that notion of the network, interconnected network of all beings, I think is a much more authentic picture of the way nature, the way we meet the world, the way we meet nature. Somehow having humanity in the center and everything else here to serve has proven to be a failure. That's an unsustainable view, because our planet, indeed, this guy, I'm gonna go back to share my screen one more time. This is in fact the view that science confirms, that this thing, this blue marble seen from the dark side of the moon, this is Apollo 8. These photographs were taken from Apollo 8. This is a very lonely blue marble in a black looking glass. When we look out into the vastness of space, all we see are our faces looking back, right? How important that we find a way now to sustain this lonely, this is Earthrise. This was the first photo. Earthrise changed our view. We realized that that's it. There is no planet B, right? It's just this. So we need to cherish it. So how do we do it? Well, let's look at that first one I mentioned about greed. The monastic rule, our code of precepts, celebrates human life in the world without honoring greed. There is an alternate worldview that functions without insatiable greed, a worldview that has sustained our lives for centuries, a view that is thriving. I'm going to stop my share so you can see me. Here we go. A view that is thriving at the present. That worldview emphasizes moderation instead of excess, the middle way instead of extremes, and sufficiency instead of a life-denying scarcity, right? This notion is, monks have always lived simply. And it doesn't mean a bitter compromise with scarcity, right? The monastics that I know, certainly Swami Prabhupada was this way. Swami Vedananda was this way. Swami Prasanatmananda is this way. They are joyful beings. Smile is just right, is the next expression that you get. And somehow their simplicity does not lend them to a kind of a bitter, pinched, sighing sufficiency, you know, scarcity, but we'll do. No, it's not that at all. Somehow emphasizing simplicity brings joy to the heart, not a sorrow, right? The way many of us assume that denying all desire makes us unhappy. It's the opposite. Trying to satisfy desire is what leads to dukkha, to the sense of unsatisfying, dissatisfaction. So monks' rules celebrate contentment with sufficiency and gratitude, the sense of how wonderful to be able to feed this body, this human body that I have, and then go on to make life better for others. What else gets you out of bed in the morning, right? So monks don't survive by competing in the trenches with everyone else for a slice of the dwindling pie of resources. We believe that if you can live mindfully, carefully, avoiding extremes, celebrating moderation, there is plenty, not only for my mouth, but for the mouth of all humans and all animals, without sacrificing their lives. Gratitude for that sufficiency makes life joyful. Living simply with contentment instead of greed is a hallmark of monastic codes, East and West. So how important is us for now in the new normal when so much is denied us, including human contact, right? Back in Melbourne, in Victoria, Australia, Victoria State, they've gone back into quarantine, back into lockdown, right? Because they lost control. Now we're here in the Gold Coast, up in Queensland, and we're blessed with the virus is not here, but it could flare up immediately, and we'll go back into quarantine. So what an opportunity for us to sort out what is need and what is greed. The Buddha said that greed, hatred, and delusion are 3 poisons, and of the 10 evil deeds, 3 of them are evils done by the mind. Greed is the foremost of those evils. So the Buddha said poison. What is poison? Poison destroys your life. Greed poisons the mind. So what do? We say moderate, know when to stop. Happiness comes from contentment and fewness of desires. So since greed is a poison, practicing contentment counteracts greed. The practice of staying content and grateful from enough arises from knowing sufficiency. The Chinese say, 知足常乐. When we can be content, we're always happy. So this is different from frugality and scarcity, right? The idea is sufficiency and contentment with what comes. Scarcity is the idea that everybody's struggling for a share of the same pie. And if it's a zero sum, you get it, I lose it, right? That's not the way nature builds the forest around my cabin. In the view of scarcity, there's only so much to go around, and so inevitably there's contention and competition. The monk's vision is based on a radically different idea, the notion that sharing and reducing desires, resting content with moderate needs, is the source of joy. Right? So that's excuse me, that's one of the key ideas. The second one that I want to share today is ahimsa. And ahimsa is very familiar in a Hindu context. It's a Sanskrit word that means no harming or nonviolence. And the basic idea is there's always a choice available, a way to live skillfully that is not at some fellow creature's expense. Ahimsa is an important hallmark of Buddhist and Vedanta monastic codes. And the world can live from this, the world can learn from this, right? If we commit ourselves to not harming, but living blamelessly, this is noble and central to our monastic vocation. How about your family? Is it central to how you teach your kids? I would hope so. What's the best way to teach? By example, right? So this view is embedded in both the Vedanta lifestyle and the Buddhist lifestyle. And in the Buddhist pratimoksha, the rules for monks, we are told not to kill. We are taught not to light fires on open ground, not to dig the earth, to liberate beings when we witness their peril, and not to eat meat. So we tend to be vegetarian and vegan. Not all. There are meat-eating Buddhists as well, but in the Chinese Mahayana tradition, we're vegetarians. So this principle signals the unambiguous presence of ecological concerns in the Buddha's codes for proper behavior. Reverence for life means that many, but not all monks from the outset employed plant-based diets instead of meat-based diets. So research is appearing every month to testify that removing meat from the diet does more to reduce your carbon footprint than buying a hybrid vehicle. Livestock are responsible for more harmful gases than internal combustion engines. True, says the United Nations. So monks have traditionally avoided participating in armed forces and military combat, a significant part of ahimsa. The Pratimoksha code for monks forbids monks from taking up arms or for performing as a military envoy for a country. Monks are not allowed to visit battlefields or places of armed combat. So the caution here, not everyone is a monk, and it's naive to think that a country can do without an armed force. Our teacher, Master Xuanhua, whose photo you saw, he said in a past life he was a general. So he was not one to say, get rid of all weapons. He said that's unwise in terms of real world politics. However, in terms of myself, my decision to kill even to the point of thinking harmful thoughts is a question that I personally answer by saying, I choose to live harmlessly. Every creature loves his life. When I can remove hateful thoughts from the environment, I have made a contribution to the world. So armies might take advantage of monks' non-combatant status to employ monks or nuns as messengers to benefit one side or another. No, can't do that either. So this is a radical commitment to nonviolence, to ahimsa. Now let me talk about that third one. This I think is key. And one of the things that monastic communities have done worldwide is celebrate spirit, living in spirit. The notion that every single bite of food that I take came to me as a gift from the conditions of this planet. And celebrating that understanding the principles, the invisible principles behind the joy of nourishing a human body are equally important and need to be celebrated. How do we do that? Well, saying a grace at food, right? Gratitude to the conditions that allow me to eat. That's a contribution from the monastic community that we in our new normal can employ every day to increase our connection, the interdependence of the world. This contemplation of Indra's net that I mentioned gives a striking image of interdependence. It models a world set back on its foundations of pre-modern wonder. Example of that, electric lights. Anybody who takes a car trip as soon as we're able up to the Sierras, do some tent camping up in the Sierras. Did you bring your flashlight batteries? Because when the sun goes down, it's dark. Oh my goodness. And what happens when it's dark and you have this thin nylon layer between you and the world out there? Every sound brings you wonder, right? And then, you get through the night and there's dew on the tent flap in the morning and the sun is rising and the look out and you just think, look how big the world is. This is pre-modern wonder. No electric light turning night to day. But what's different? We have globally connected values. True for me, loving my life, true for every living being. So this is Indra's net. There is a notion in the Chinese Buddhist tradition called Tong Ti Da Bei, same body, great compassion. And that is to say that in my human body, I share an identical makeup with all beings, earth, air, fire, and water. Make up my body. Whales are the same, mosquitoes are the same, kookaburras are the same, wombats and wallabies are the same. The earth is my teeth and bones, tendons and skin, shared with all mammals, invertebrates, and insects. Air, heart, lungs, arteries, skin pores, mouth, the space that allows me to communicate. My voice goes out to your ears through the air element, right? The water that makes up 80% of our bodies, the blood, the tears, the saliva, etc. And the warmth, 98.6 Fahrenheit. For fish, a little less. Without that fire, we die, right? So how powerful is that? That to be aware of this, to be connected to all living beings and recognize that that invisible thing that lives within our Tong Ti, our same body, how different is that from a Vedanta Swami to a Buddhist bhikshu, right? From a imam from the Islamic tradition to a rabbi from the Jewish tradition. What is the difference in that invisible but central Buddha nature, Brahman, great spirit, godlike soul, right? What's the difference? That's worthy of reflection and meditation. So when you come to the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, what do you find? You step inside our temple. I think our monk Jinchuan, you can see our Buddha hall and his icon for his Zoom square there. And what you see in the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery is we're called, I guess, high church Buddhists, because when you step inside the Berkeley Monastery, you see images of bodhisattvas and dharma protectors and arhats and dragons. Oh my. So people say, what are you doing with all these dragons? I've never seen so many dragons in one place, downtown Berkeley, you know. So in fact, the Buddhist teaching that came to us from Asia in the sutras and in the Pratimoksha code is a world full of gods, dragons, spiritual pantheon of animated and invisible creatures of all kinds. Sutras tell us that every Dharma gathering attracted an eightfold pantheon: devas, nagas, yakshas, asuras, gandharvas, garudas, right? Maras, fairies of all description. The sutras describe from the Buddha's view countless living beings in worlds that exist within worlds. So this connection with the realms of spirit are affirmed by whom? Indigenous peoples the world around. Here in Australia, we're surrounded by dream time. These are pre-modern, earth-based civilizations. They call the earth Pachamama, Mother Earth, Gaia, Earth household. The world is a miraculous place of wonder, of terror in the dark when you hear that sound, and most of all, sentient spirit. So in their actual practices, monastic communities, East and West, inhabit the pre-modern world more than the scientific, linear, reductionist, postmodern world. I think most monasteries are closer to the Pachamama view of Mother Earth in our day-to-day practices. In this view, humanity is part of and not apart from kinship with all creatures. We are knit into and inextricably related to all other species. We can't withdraw our humanity from the net of all beings. Our role as humans is to stay humble and reverent, not to waste, to be grateful and wise in our sharing and stewardship of resources, and to show compassion to other neighboring species who inhabit this planet with us. The Buddha in the sutras describes the earth as a community to be lived in harmoniously and wisely, not as a commodity to be exploited and consumed by the strongest and the most ruthless. So if we put into practice the views that I've outlined, the no greed, but contentment instead, the ahimsa, cherishing life, and the sense of spirit and the joy and the wonder at inhabiting this human body in community with other living beings, what this does is it reanimates nature in our daily lives. I was raised Methodist, Protestant, as in Toledo, Ohio, where I grew up. And bless their hearts, there's so much goodness in the Christian tradition and the Protestant tradition. But one of the things that I never felt at home with was the sterility of the world described in the church. Now, there are historical reasons for that. We won't go into that now, but it had to do basically with a reaction against what the Roman Catholic Church had become in those years, where the Holy Roman Emperor could send your soul to hell and put your body in jail at the same time. And so the Protestant Reformation was about reacting against the ring and the crozier and the gold crown and all. And they said, get rid of all of that. We are iconoclastic. We want one thing only, logos. We want the gospel. That's reliable. Okay, so that was the tradition I was raised in. And as a result, the Virgin Mary, the Blessed Virgin, was not there, right? Jesus was, in his suffering, was taken down from the cross. And the stained glass windows with all the wonderful stories of the heritage of the church were removed and replaced with colored glass. And I think that because America post-World War II was a time of the great industrial conquerors that America became, right, with our science and our inventions. And we conquered nature, and the religion leading the way was reduced to a single word, and humanity was cut off from the world around us. There was no door open, no celebration of the natural world. Well, science has moved on since the 50s, post-war America, and we've learned that, in fact, we're all deeply connected. Quantum physics came along and showed that an event here could influence an event over here without any visible connection between them. How does that happen? Well, it's because, I'm not going to tell you why. I can't tell you why, but consciousness has to do with it. Science is still very much in a debate about what is consciousness. But the Buddha was saying, yes, we are all, there is consciousness throughout. In fact, every mote of dust, he said, has Buddhas in the number of sand grains in the Ganges riverbank. So that story brings me to life. I vibrate when I hear about my responsibility to all life, living in and through me, and my connection. That makes sense to me. So I think when we're finding this pandemic now, our new normal, right, which is breathing can kill you. That was the lesson from AIDS, wasn't it? The lesson from AIDS was that somehow normal reproduction of the human species can be fatal to us. Well, that's not a good situation. That's a toxic situation, right? So what about when breathing can kill you because of the virus? That's our new normal. We are deeply connected. We need to learn now in a way that moves into this interconnection, not trying to deny it, and find a way to live skillfully. So in the world of a monastery, Vedanta or Buddhist alike, nature is full of spirit, and our lives resemble a pre-modern, indigenous culture's interdependent, animated worldview. I'm not saying we need to return to a mythical golden age, a blissful innocence, an Eden before the temptation. No, I'm suggesting that instead we follow the Buddha's insistence on seeing things as they are. We follow the wisdom of earth-based peoples who have always known that nature is one texture, one fabric, and humanity is knit into it inextricably, right? What is our guide for that? Is Earthrise, right? That picture. The Apollo 8 mission, 1969, once we saw that photograph, things were different. We saw the limits. We saw the finite quality of our home, our Earth household. And we noticed that close by our planet, there's inky black space. So once we've seen the reality of our finite family of living beings spinning on the tiny blue marble of our planet in a vast, empty, infinite universe, there is no turning back to an isolated, self-interested, tribal view of life as struggle for survival. We need to expand that view, incorporating the monastic wisdom and compassion that asks us to evolve, to step back from our feverish dream of the competitive marketplace where the senses are on fire, to a pre-modern person's awe and appreciation for the interrelated power of the natural world. But with a global concern for all beings as one large body, one interrelated sentient family, we need to combine pre-modern wonder with a global ethical sense. So a monastic's pre-modern lifestyle that includes a heartfelt connection with the earth and all living beings can be a significant healing gift from the monks to a world of weary, discouraged souls who have very little hope of finding a workable alternative in the town square of our postmodern culture, especially when we're wearing masks and told to get home and close the door. So that's a little bit some of the ideas I wanted to share today. And I really, really thank you for the opportunity to do so. I want to contribute one more sharing with us, which is we have been, in the Buddhist tradition, one of our Buddhas is named Vaisajya Rajguru. His name is Medicine Buddha, the healing Buddha. And our Buddha is the medicine Buddha. He has a mantra that he encourages us to recite when times are hard, when we want to find a way to heal our bodies. And we have it in Sanskrit. And I've been chanting it every opportunity I get, along with these noisy birds. And I'd like to invite you all to join me today. Let me share my screen again. Here we are. Here's Medicine Buddha's mantra for anointing the crown of the head. Anointing? Is that misspelled? Anointing the crown of the head. There we go. So here it is. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arhate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Vaisajya 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 Samudgate Svaha Om. Now, it's, I return, I take refuge in the one honored by the world, the healing Buddha by Sadhguru. He has lapis lazuli, Vaidurya light. He is the Tathagata, the one come thus. He is an arhat, he is perfectly awake, and his mantra goes, to the healing, let us all be healed. Let it be so, svaha, may all things be auspicious. Okay, so that's our, you're welcome to join me. We'll do it 3 times. Here we go. Now, before we do it, I'm going to ask that those of you who you're not used to singing in Sanskrit, please make a wish with your heart and send out thoughts of goodness, thoughts for well-being, in any direction you choose, whoever you would like to share your wholesome thoughts with. This is a kind of a dedication of the merit that we can do with this mantra, and it's really powerful when our consciousness is pointed in one direction together, right? So if you choose not to chant along, no worries. But I would ask you to please send out your best wishes. I think the virus came from empty space, probably from people eating the wrong kind of meat, but we can send it back to empty space when our hearts are full of compassion and well-being for all creatures. So let's do that together. Here we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Pravarajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Taryata Vaisaje Vaisaja Samudgate Swaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Pravarajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Taryata Vaisaje Vaisaja Samudgate Swaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Pravarajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Taryata Vaisaje Vaisaja Samudgate Swaha. All righty. Here we go. Now we've got 6 minutes of my lecture time available, but I think I'll give that over to questions. So we've got room here, and let's see. If people would like to actually, Jin Chuan, we have a message from Master Jin Chuan, who says, if people have questions, please write it in the chat box or raise your hand, and he will be happy to call on you. Now, I'm not going to name any names. If I don't get any questions, I may just not call Brian Conroy's name and ask him to, but I won't do that. So let's see here. Jin Chuan, you want to be you can be the question wala. Okay, one of the participants wanted to share a link of Master Shrenhua's talk at the Vedanta Society. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to click on that and take us there. Let's see. Here we are. Aha. There we go. 1992, Master Hua at the Vedanta Retreat in Olima. Now that is 3 hours and 57 minutes long. I want to warn you. You need to pick through here carefully. It starts with Master Hua. This is the morning session, and then I believe Professor Houston Smith stands up and asks a question in Chinese. Interestingly, let's see. Is Professor Smith? Yes, here he is. Let's see what Professor Smith had to say. That was. He says, I come from Zongzak, says Professor Smith. Oh, I lost him. He's in there somewhere. So anyway, you all can look in. This includes the afternoon program as well. So that's why it's the whole day of Q&A, etc. But Master Hua's talk, where he talks about knowing a lot about stupidity, nothing about wisdom, that's in the first part of it. So that link is in the chat box. All right, let's see here. We have a question. 法师您好，请问昨日的华严经文本可以借给我们一份吗? The question in Chinese was yesterday's Avatamsaka Sutra lecture text. Can I give a copy? Actually, 对不起，不能流通这个第10例，为什么没有经过我们的许可？这个都要编辑，要人事才能出版。这个是草稿，这是我们自己弄的。以后写好了之后，很愿意流通给你。So what I said was, sorry, the text that we're working on has not been edited by our Buddhist Text Translation Committee. All our text sutras that we issue go through 4 committees. And this is still a rough draft that we're working on because it hasn't been published yet, the 10th stage of the Avatamsaka. So once it's published, we'll make sure you get a copy. Thanks for the question. Let's see here. Nice to see a couple guitars, and I didn't move my guitar out of there. How do we control our mind to pull us back from the senses every moment? What's the trick? It's not a trick, it's a technique. It's a tool. If you have the tool, you don't need the trick. Got it? So, question, how do we pull our senses back? The quick answer is through meditation. Why do I say that? You who have tried meditation, whatever technique, whatever method you use, know that our senses don't want to listen to us, particularly the mind, right? The mind is like, the images, a monkey jumping from branch to branch, a wild horse running away on the plains, right? Kicking open the gate and leaving the barn. So our minds are like that. So what do? We learn to meditate. We just have to meditate. And bit by bit, whatever method we use, are using vipassana, not shamatha, are you using contemplations, metta bhavana, loving kindness? What are you using to tame the mad monkey mind? Bit by bit, it starts to listen to us more than we have to listen to it, right? So there's no secret. I wish there were a quicker way. And one wonderful thing about meditation is it's embodied. You meditate in your body. We meditate in our bodies. Our bodies are our senses. For example, what is the skin? The skin is the biggest sense, isn't it? So that's, this covers the whole body. So when we're sitting, what if it's too cold? We have to adjust. Too hot, have to adjust. Knees start to hurt, have to adjust, right? We have to live into our bodies long enough that we get to know them. They become our friends. They start to listen to us. Bit by bit, we approach that state called samadhi. And when we're in a state of samadhi, then our bodies listen to us, right? And our senses are tamed at that point. So I wish there were a trick. It's not, it's a tool, indeed. Okay, 这种事情自己解决最好. Okay, so question from Jeff. When Shenhua saw Reverend with guitar, what happened? Not what you expect. Not what you expect. I'll tell that story. That's a story worth telling. So what you just heard me play was a banjo, actually. But when I was a folk singer, some of you are old enough to remember folk music boom. And I started when I was 14 to play guitar. And I knew that monks don't, right? In our tradition, just like Vedanta, monks don't touch guitars. They don't touch musical instruments that way. And so I decided I wanted to become a monk and leave home. And at that point, I had 3 possessions. I had a guitar, a Nikon camera, and a Volvo sedan. The 3 last things I owned. And so when I promised that I was going to move into the monastery, I thought, well, gotta sell my Guild guitar, a Guild D40 that I bought in Manny's music store in Manhattan. You know, it had been my companion for years and years, and I had to sell it. And so I moved into the monastery, bringing my Volvo, my guitar, and my camera. And I put a want ad. You remember want ads? Remember? You used to go to the newspaper and ask them, you pay for the inch, right? Or the number of words in your want ad. So I went to the San Francisco Chronicle and I put a want ad to sell Guild guitar, $300. Now it was worth $600, but I was going to sell it because I wanted to sell it. So the morning that the ad was going to appear in the newspaper, I was at the front desk in the monastery and the phone rang and it was, hello, Guozhan. Shifu? This is Master Hua calling on the phone from upstairs. I was downstairs watching the door. Guozhan, Shifu? What are you doing? He said. I said, Shifu, I'm selling my guitar. Stupid, says Master Hua. Shifu? Stupid, he says. Shifu? He says, why are you selling your guitar? I said, I want to be a monk, Shifu. I want to leave home. I have to get rid of all my attachments. He said, stupid. He said, you're never going to be Chinese. You're not an old Chinese monk. You live in America. In America, people understand guitars. He said, you have to use everything that you have to teach people in your culture. He said, why do you want to pretend to be an old Chinese monk? You can't be. He said, in the future, a bhikshu who can play guitar in this culture will be very helpful. And I said, no, Shifu, I have to leave home right away. I got to sell my guitar. Stupid. Click. Hangs up the phone. and so the ring, hello, Guild guitar, $300. Don't sell it. I'm coming right over. You know. So a guy came and bought the guitar. Immediately, I regretted selling it because number one, I disobeyed my first instructions from my teacher. Number two, his principle made a lot of sense. So 25 years, I didn't touch a guitar. And then one night at the Berkeley Monastery, I saw a teacher, James Barras, leading the Spirit Rock East Bay group. And he had an old Gibson guitar and he played a Crosby, Stills and Nash song. And 80 meditators in the audience all sang along in unison. To get 80 Berkeleyites to agree on anything is hard, you know, and they all sang along happily. And I thought, boy, that is a skillful, expedient means. And then within the next couple of weeks, a very kind-hearted couple living in Boulder Creek, California, provided me with a Big Baby Taylor guitar, somebody who will remain unnamed. And that started me out on my next phase of my life. So I've been playing guitar and banjo since that time. And music is now a part of what I do. So I can sing Sanskrit mantras with a banjo without contradicting the, Now, certainly my precepts say I don't sing, dance, play musical instruments, or watch or listen just to such diversions. However, in this culture, it's helpful. If I wiggle my hips and I start to vibrato, I've lost it all. I'm no longer worth listening to. But if I can use the music to help the principles of the sutras go down, I've done the job. So thank you for the question, Jeff. Let's see here. If one important act that we all and everyone from everywhere can contribute to the new norm, what was the most important act we can hold on to? Kindness, by far, to be kind. How do you measure kindness? Ask yourself the golden rule. If it hurts me, I don't want to do it to anyone else. Kindness is not doing to others what you don't want done to yourself, and doing for others what you enjoy. That's kindness. Do you need a model? Think of a mother. The Metta Sutta says, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. That is the Metta Sutta, right? The Sutra of Loving Kindness. So we can do that. We've done a lot. If our president would just be kind, you know, imagine what a different world we'd be in. Let's see here. Let's see. So from Manchuria, a question from Liaoning, Manchuria. 请问法师，我们有没有梵语课？面对我们中国大陆的学子，现在恐怕没有，法界大学有，上网。Let's see. The question is there a Sanskrit class for Chinese speakers? Jinchuan, is there a Sanskrit class for Chinese speakers? I don't think so. Online?
Not online. I know that when I went to Dharma Drum, they actually had a class for Chinese speakers in Sanskrit. We do have Sanskrit classes at DRBU, but you have to come to DRBU to learn. So welcome to sign up.
就说我必须要到法界大学来申请，然后可以啊，上网没有，网络没有了，对不起啊。So, is today's talk available somewhere to listen to and share with others? Says Pilates from Pasadena. We'll have to ask Venerable Swamiji whether this will be available. Swami Prasad,
this talk will be available on our website and Facebook as well.
Excellent. Okay, I think the Berkeley Monastery will also try to circulate it. A question from Canada, from Sahar. Can chanting mantras and bowing, is chanting and mantras and bowing a form of meditation? I can't sit in Chan meditation. Absolutely. The point of meditation, no matter what form it takes, is the mind, ultimately. Now, if the body doesn't obey, then the mind finds it hard to rest. So the reason why we sit in full lotus is to, they say yoke the body. The word yoga comes from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to yoke, like a big piece of wood over a water buffalo. The water buffalo is hugely powerful, right? And if you don't control it, you'll go where it wants to go. It weighs thousands of pounds. So you put this yoke on it and you pull this way, you pull that way. Yoga, the asanas of yoga, yoke the body so that it will listen to you. So you, in your question, you suggested bowing. Bowing is a wonderful way to calm the body. We do ritual prostrations. And bit by bit, after that first half an hour of bowing, your body is much more willing to calm down and let the mind rise so you can deal with the contents of the mind. But in every case, it's hard work. None of these are a magic bullet that you know, one shot and everything's good. You have to work with these. And ideally, body and mind in harmony can find that state of samadhi. And from samadhi comes wisdom. Can we teach kids to be good citizens of the world in this world? How can we teach kids to be good citizens of the world in the world of turmoil and conflicts? The best answer, by example. I wish there were a way to, you know, stop it, listen to me. No, that's not going to work. We hated that when we were kids, right? So what do? The smaller monkey imitates the bigger monkey. It's really true. If you see a father striding through a place of stress, like an airport, lots of buzz, buzz, buzz in the airport, little boy will get right in line behind dad and imitate him perfectly, right? The mom is brushing her hair. The daughter The little girl, she will do it exactly the way mom does, right? We are still monkey see, monkey do in many of our lessons that we learn as humans. And so for the parents, we are our children's best teachers, no doubt about it. And so when, if we cut corners, if we use four-letter words, if we let our anger go all the time, that's our lesson. We've taught our kids how to be adults. So to be patient in the middle where you can't be patient, that's the number one lesson, I think. So let's see here. How do we practice in our lives bowing repentance meditation? The thing to do is to look at your priorities. What matters most? And certainly health matters. When it's taken away from us, we can't meditate. But once we have those needs met, what I find is that I want to contribute. There's a joy in giving. What do they say? 助人是快乐之本, right? Helping others is the foundation of happiness. And so once I've had some food to nourish my body and there's a roof over my head so the rain doesn't come in and the wind doesn't blow me, then my next thought is, who else is hurting? And if there's a way to reach out into the world around and make their pains less, to help them understand the problems they're facing, that's, I think, a life worth living. So all of meditation is designed to put us in a place where we can actually listen to what's going on with the people around us so we can find a way to help them. For myself, I was blessed by my teacher with the introduction to Buddhist texts. So I find my job as a monk is pretty much to explore those texts in concert with others. So languages come in, idioms come in, music as a way to help digest, So that's one thing that I do as a monk, is I look into the text. And I know if we look at the life of Swami Vivekananda, here's a life well lived. He went to the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago, and in one speech opened up the religions of Asia to people who had no sense of anything authentic coming from India or China or Asia. Swami Vivekananda, and the stories about how difficult it was for him to get to Chicago. We all know about his performance there at the Parliament of World Religions, but the stories before it and the stories after it, including the first Unitarian church in Oakland, California in 1900 was a place where Swami Vivekananda gave some of his important talks. There's a lot, how he got there is a big question and quite a wonderful story in itself. But in fact, he did. And to this day, the Unitarians consider it the most distinguished part of their history, was that Swami Vivekananda was able to speak from that pulpit in the Unitarian Church in Oakland. It's right on the freeway right now. It's just this small neighborhood church, but he picked that place out because of an invitation to speak Dharma. So, we share so much with our Vedanta brothers and sisters. And my time, I have a lot of questions, and I've saved them. I've saved the questions. We don't have time to answer them all, but I'll see if we get another opportunity, we'll find a chance to answer. So, Swamiji, back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Heng, for such an enlightening deliberation on the Buddhist perspective in this scenario of new normal. You spoke beautifully about the perfection of morality, which is to extinguish the fire of senses. And you referred the Panchashila, the 5 Shilas. Actually, I did some research on this Panchashila and Swamiji's complete works. Surprisingly, I found that the gist of Swami Vivekananda's teachings is these 5 teachings. Let me give 5 examples. The first Shila is stealing. Swamiji said, give. He wrote a poem, which is to a friend. And there a line is this: give away. Whoever asks, return. His ocean dwells down to a mere drop. So give and give. This is the one very important message of Swami Vivekananda. Second is sexual misconduct. Swamiji said character, build character, and the chastity. Swamiji gives tremendous emphasis in chastity and character. Third is killing. Swamiji said, service to man is service to God. Service. Then lies. Swamiji said, truth. He said, societies should be molded upon truth, and truth has not to adjust itself to society. So if you see carefully, you can find Swamiji's many teachings. If we can categorize, we find these important 5 teachings. These are the basis of Swami Vivekananda's teachings. So wonderfully, you have dealt these 2 things, and definitely these are the foundations of any monastery, whether it is a Buddhist monastery or it is a Vedanta monastery. So beautifully you have explained all these things, and you have connected it to the new normal. Thank you very much. I also express my thanks and gratitude to Master Jin Chuan of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery for arranging this Zoom platform for this large audience. I convey my thanks and good wishes to all who have connected by Zoom to participate in this beautiful lecture. I convey my thanks and gratitude to the devotees of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Thank you once again, and definitely we look forward for Reverend Heng Shu's physical, real lecture at Berkeley Temple. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Swamiji. Blessings to everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe. Bye-bye.